horn blowing at 2 a.m. This is the same America, but I don't recognize a thing. Tired story, tired fear, I want it all within the year. This is the same America, we're all wishing on a dream, but so many fell asleep. Old like grandpa, old like loss. Go on now, give fate a toss. You're living in America, you can't count on anything. Empty promise, empty bowls. We got good ideas, can't patch the holes, but we're living in America. We're all counting on this thing. Fresh like linen, like lemonade, bound as we are to fade away. I'm living in America and I don't count on anything. Hope for sunrise, hope for change, while America goes up in flames. The screens, the money rob us clean, a cheap shot hit right to the knees. America, you're a sight to see. Say, can you see? Oh, say, can you see? I can't count on you, but you've been left to me.
Window on the highest floor. From up here you can see for miles. And since there's no one at the door, I might just stay here for a while. That's where I see her walking by, the windowsill dusty and gloomy, and there she weaves by night and day, a magic web that beckons to me. She never shows me the silver that's inside her, she strings it out to me just like a spider. Oh, so I stay stuck, the days go on. Oh, spider, spider, don't make me wait too long. String me along, I keep singing all my old songs. Well, does it make sense to be stuck without defense? So goodbye, goodbye, I don't think I'll stay. What would I go to? What would I go to? My feet are stuck, my tongue is tied, it's true. If you spin a web, when flies get stuck in your web, let them free fly, I drink them till they're dry. I know I'll never be an insect king, so I won't take any more. Ever it is that she spins for her, webs up in wash your hands and break them. But if she really didn't care, why would she take the time to make them? You're not my girl, you're my friend, but I still love you. And since you came back home, I feel 100 miles from you. Oh, so I stay. The days go on. Spider, spider, don't make me wait too long. years I've been here now, I've been searching every day for my true and perfect lover. Where she is I cannot say. So tell me, could you tell me, brother? And if you could, would you tell me soon where to find my perfect lover? 'Cause I've been howling at the moon. Thought I'd caught a few years back now. Turns out I was so wrong then. She was not my perfect lover, 'cause she was not truly my friend. But you should know I ain't no quitter. I try until I'm deep in my tune, and where the world would make me bitter, I just howl at the moon. I just howl at the moon. I just howl at the moon. This whole world's so full of beauty, with pretty girls each place I go, a few of whom I get to meet and fewer still I get to know. And when at last I think I've seen her, my heart fills up like a balloon. But when life pops it with its pinpricks, I heal by howling at the moon. I heal by howling at the moon. Heal by howling at the moon. I suspect she's near. And when we finally find each other, I will sing my happiest tune. And I know you will hear it, brother, 'cause we'll be howling it at the moon. We'll be howling it at the moon. We'll be howling it at the moon. Tell me, could you tell me, brother? And if you could, would you tell me soon where to find my perfect lover? 'Cause I've been howling at the moon. I've been howling at the moon. I've been howling at the moon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Education Summit 2019. Today, we're brought together to teach sustainability across disciplines and foster connection within the sustainability education community. This summit is brought together through great collaboration of all the University of Minnesota campuses. Those are in Morris, Crookston, Duluth, Rochester, and here in the Twin Cities. My name is Pierre Levin. I'm the Summit Education Coordinator, and I work at the Institute of the Environment as a graduate research assistant. Today, you might hear the Institute of the Environment referred to as the I&E. Some other acronyms you might hear are for UMN or U of M for the University of Minnesota. System-wide refers to occurring on all 5 University of Minnesota campuses, and you'll probably learn another acronym or two from people you meet at the summit. So we are excited to be piloting this new format today. It's blended, and overall, between the University of Minnesota's campus attendees and online, we have over 250 people registered. So although you seem that you might just be in this room with the people around you, there are people in 21 different states and 5 different countries that are participating today. And so we strive to have these connections and ideas generated here to continue on beyond these 3 hours. To do that, we have a few ways. One is we have the Summit Flipgrid set up. To go to the Flipgrid, it is at flipgrid.com/SUST Summit. And on there, it's an online platform for posing questions and answering questions on sustainability. We have a partnership with NZIA Magazine. It's an online environmental magazine. They will go through our questions at the end of the summit and pick 1 or 2 to do an article. So your question could become an online article. It's pretty cool. So you can go there now, it's live, and it will continue throughout the summit and beyond. We hope you can make connections of people everywhere across working on sustainability. A few more updates is social media. If you're going to follow us, our handle on Instagram and Twitter is at UMNSustEd. And before we start, in the Twin Cities campus, a couple announcements for the event here. Bathrooms are down the hall. In the atrium, there's also water fountains there. And then 2 floors down, there's more bathrooms, and 2 floors up, there's more bathrooms. And if you have questions throughout the summit, just look for people walking around with this nice little button, Institute of the Environment button, and they'll be able to answer your questions for you. And so the agenda for today will be, we're going to start off with a welcome from the Director of the Institute of Environment, Dr. Jessica Hellman. And then we will go into the first section, which is Teaching Sustainability Across Disciplines, where educators from the University of Minnesota will present how they're teaching sustainability in their discipline. And then we'll have a brief intermission where you can do an interactive poll online or in person, and also get some more food and network and use the bathroom. And then we're going to go into the campus visits, place-based education, where we'll see videos from Duluth, Morris, Crookston, and the Twin Cities displaying how we teach sustainability through the use and care of the land. And then we'll have some closing activities after that. So before our first presenter, I would like to have an exciting announcement that at the Institute of the Environment, we are happy to have Dr. Kathy Jordan, who is an Associate Professor of Pediatrics and Extension Specialist at the University of Minnesota, and a Consulting Research Director for the Children and Nature Network. She'll be joining the Institute of the Environment as Associate Director for Leadership and Education. So please join me in welcoming Kathy to our team. Okay, so we're going to get started. So first, we're going to have opening remarks from Dr. Jessica Hellman. Dr. Hellman is the Director of the Institute of the Environment at the University of Minnesota. As our director, she provides overall strategic leadership for the Institute. We're an internationally recognized organization working to solve grand environmental challenges. We're promoting interdisciplinary research and teaching and leadership across the university, also included external partners and stakeholders. She is also the Russell M. and Elizabeth M. Bennett Chair in Excellence in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Behavior in the University of Minnesota Twin Cities Campus College of Biological Sciences. And she'll be giving us the opening remarks today. Please welcome.
Whoa, watch it. I was just tweeting a picture of you, Peter, so I had to finish that before stepping up here. And you have to be careful. You can't stand in front of the hashtag. People can see. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As Peter said, I'm Jessica Hellman. I'm the director here at the Institute on the Environment. And like Peter just acknowledged, I would like to also express my excitement and enthusiasm about our new Associate Director for Leadership and Education here at the Institute on the Environment, Kathy Jordan, who is gracing us with her presence today, though technically her official first day in that role is on Monday. Those of you who have been following or are affiliated with the Institute, part of the Institute, part of our community, know that we've been working on finding new leaders for our Institute for a while, and Kathy is one of them, and we're so excited. So the Institute on the Environment, Peter already suggested a bit about what we are. We are more than a decade old now, and we serve the entire University of Minnesota across all of the campuses. So I want to acknowledge everyone online from Morris and Crookston and Rochester and the Twin Cities and other places around the country and the world, the Institute on the Environment is here to advance sustainability for the entire University of Minnesota. And we do that in two ways. Firstly, we know from experience that making progress on sustainability is fundamentally an interdisciplinary thing. So the Institute is a place where people come together from different colleges and campuses and departments and perspectives and points of view and find like-minded people who will make progress with them on sustainability. That's the first part. The other part is we know that making progress on sustainability is not just an ivory tower kind of thing, but we have to be willing to work with our partners and collaborators and people who share our interest in sustainability outside the university. So the Institute on the Environment is committed to being one of those front doors, a place where we interact with folks outside the university for the benefit of our state and for the benefit of the whole world. We recently have been, as Kathy is an example, have been working on strengthening and articulating what is the core value of the Institute on the Environment to the university and to our state and to the world. And we focus on three things. They are very much interrelated. But that particular kind of research and knowledge generation that is interdisciplinary and moves the needle on sustainability, we call that knowledge. On education and leadership development, where we are all here today celebrating and recognizing and building best practices in what does it mean to become an agent, an actor, a learner, a doer in the sustainability space. And then thirdly, in order to advance sustainability, we need to be able to tell stories and share information in compelling ways with diverse audiences about what sustainability knowledge and sustainability leadership looks like. And so today we are particularly here to think about how do we advance education and leadership development for the benefit of sustainability outcomes. And this is the third Sustainability Summit. A huge shout out to our sustainability education program, Beth and Peter and Mary and many other sustainability minor students who have been a crucial part and have shown the leadership to cause the Sustainability Summit to come about. The idea for the summit originated in 2016 with our first group of what we call I&E educators. I&E educators are a group of people who are actively practicing pedagogy and leadership in education development at the U, who want to work on a project and need the support of experts here at the Institute to help them in advancing that project. We're now on our second cohort. The first cohort came up with the idea of this summit, and soon we will be seeking nominations during the summer and into the fall for our third cohort. It's really an amazing program. We're building this network of deeply committed educators. Why is a summit like this important? It's important because the work that you all do is so important. Because sustainability is not something that we know exactly how to do it. We know what some of the key ingredients are, but the path is not determined. The future is not known and already preordained. It's about what we seek it to be and how we develop the capacity of people to bring that future about. And so we need to get together and talk about those ideas and share our best practices and inspire one another. And we can do that by sitting in the same room as we are here in the Twin Cities, and I know folks are in Duluth and Morris and elsewhere. And we can also do it by joining together using some new technologies like Flipgrid online. So I'd really like to second Peter's request that you would please post your comments. That's a really great place. We're going to have a long-term record of what people were thinking about this day, and we'll be able to take action in response to those comments around the summit. So I hope you enjoy the show. I know I will. I'm grateful for you all spending your time here with us today, and I'll turn it back over to Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. So to begin, for our first section, we're going to do exactly that. Those I&E educators, that second cohort, they have worked tirelessly to prepare what they've been working on through this 15-month fellowship with us at the Institute of the Environment. And as a culminating part of it, they have made these video presentations showing how they are doing creative, innovative ways to teach sustainability in their fields, and that it can be in many different fields. And so to start with those, what's going to happen is we'll show a video, and then we'll have a live Q&A afterwards. And so to submit a question to the educators for the live Q&A, if you're an in-person event, just write a question on an index card and raise your hand and our coordinator will grab it. And if you are online, you can type your question into the YouTube live chat or on Twitter or Instagram by using the handle #SustSummit19. And there'll only be about 8 minutes per educator for questions. And so because of that, we imagine we might collect more questions than we have time to answer. So we'll collect those, and then on the Flipgrid, there's a section that has educators Q&A. After the summit, they will be on there and they will answer all the questions that were presented today. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce the first presentation, which is Art for Social Justice and Environmental Justice by Dr. Linda Butarian. Dr. Butarian is a senior teaching specialist at the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, which is part of the College of Education and Human Development here on the Twin Cities campus. Enjoy her presentation.
What you got a glimpse of there was one example of visual narratives. Visual narratives is a name I've been using lately to refer to writing that is paired with images or movement or music or some combination of those in order to educate and inspire. This can include multimedia projects, for example, digital stories or visual art with text, music, and writing, and in reference to what you just experienced, choreographed and then improvised movement with an artist statement. I have integrated environmental issues in my teaching and writing through the 16 years I've been designing and teaching humanities courses at the U of M. The first dance movement you saw is a portion of UM student Kate O'Brien Baker's Art for Social Change capstone for one of the courses I teach, CI 1032, Creating Identities, Learning in and Through the Arts. Kate researched, conducted fieldwork on climate change, then choreographed, performed, and created the video. When we usher in images into our academic work, we are ushering in the power of metaphor. Lakoff and Johnson state that metaphor is one of our most important tools for trying to comprehend partially what cannot be comprehended totally: our feelings, aesthetic experiences, moral practices, and spiritual awareness. And I would add the complex issues around environmental justice. So, for example, Kate, the first dancer, in her artist statement, she said, "The movement within the video demonstrates various physical actions of climate change, such as the slow time span at which it occurs, or the wait when a partially melted glacier hits the ground." In my recent online multimedia book, The Changing Story, I included digital stories by students in addition to my writing, as well as art and photographs and music. And in chapter 6, I wrote essays about teaching with digital stories, and then we hired student artists to create an illustrative version of my essays to help us as educators and activists and organizers consider what the opportunities and challenges of integrating images in our teaching and learning. I immerse myself in nature and learn about the environment. Over 20 years now, my family and 3 other families have lived on the meadows and forest along a stretch of the Rum River, Dakota name Watpawakan. This is where most of my insights occur from my writing and teaching. My interests in community-based learning and rivers led me to accept an invite this past fall to be a guest instructor with Augsburg University's River Semester, where students spend 100 days paddling on and learning along the Mississippi River. I joined them for a week near Davenport down to St. Louis to help students create visual narratives about what they were discovering, especially around the role of community in their learning. These 15 students were kind of at the epicenter of climate change. They experienced tornado, lightning, swollen rivers. The locks and dams were closed in places due to flooding, and then they shifted their learning to the communities along the river to discover what kind of environmental justice issues they were facing. These students were on the ground not only experiencing the intersectional nature, but also impacted by the environmental justice issues. Back to Espoir, the second dancer. She's a student from Dickinson College who attended Augsburg's River Semester. And along with the other studies that she was doing, she was completing an independent study in dance. She created 14 installations along different stretches of the Mississippi River. And in her words, quote, "The goal was to mediate the story of each section of river through movement. I collaborate with those who help me seed, sustain, and actuate my ideas. Here are a few. In 2007, when I designed a freshman seminar, Water, Water Everywhere, Investigating and Protecting Our Life Source, an interdisciplinary approach to water resource topics that asked each student to create digital stories, could not have done it without Academic Technology Services, and Smart Learning Commons. Catherine Solheim, a colleague in family social science, she and I designed a study abroad to Thailand, Global Change Communities and Families, that looked at the impact of globalization and climate change on families, communities, cultures, and ways of life along the Mekong. And students created digital stories about what they learned. For my I&E projects, one of them is to design a new course on creativity and social action that has the focus of environmental justice. As we know, it's hard to envision just and vibrant futures. It's hard to create intersectional learning spaces in a Research One institution. As in the humanities, one of our charges, I would say, is to recognize the dearth of narratives around what is happening with climate change and inequitable access to natural resources. One of our tasks is to curate and gather the missing narratives of those people and the land that's adversely impacted. And then to create academic opportunities where students and community members and faculty are co-collaborators in the kind of intersectional learning, so that students can create visual narratives that help us envision just futures for the land and the people.
Hard to envision it, hard to live within it, hard to feel good, hard to envision it, hard to live within it, hard to feel good. Hard to envision it, hard to live within it, hard to feel good.
think we need a moment just to reflect on that and be inspired creatively. I'm Beth Mercer Taylor, Sustainability Education Coordinator here at the Institute on the Environment. And I'm coming to you from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus, and our friends on the campuses of Morris and Crookston and Duluth and Rochester are also with us, as well as an audience of who we hope will become our new friends and collaborators online around the world. And I am going to be working with my colleague Mary Hahnemann, who's at the back of the room. Mary, can you wave? And Mary is collecting your questions on index cards, as well as working with our students who are collecting the questions that are coming in online. But fortunately, I have a question to start off with. And I'm wondering, when we do sustainability education at the university, usually it's inside. But Linda, you have so much rich experience outside, we've just seen. And I'm wondering what changes in the way the conversation about sustainability, the talking, happens when you're outside.
Thanks for that. Good questions. And greetings, everyone, and online as well. It's interesting. I've been teaching here 16 years, and there's this kind of centrifugal force that keeps you in the classroom, and to push against that, and to get up and get out and go along the river, especially, in winter. But once they do, something happens. First of all, they're doing embodied learning, kinetic learning. They're using their bodies. And then they're connecting the ideas that we're talking about, whether it's access to clean water or the rights of a river separate from them, or practicing taking pictures. You're connecting those ideas to actual movement and engaging the senses. I think that's one of the other things, is you're engaging the five senses. And you think about these young people, they're at the height of their physical selves, and we should be finding ways to engage their bodies in their learning, which is partly one of the reasons why I framed my story with dancing. So then I think it does something different to their intellect and imagination. And then when they come back into the classroom, they have that memory and they have that experience to go on. I think it also engages past memories of being along rivers, which is something I actively do in my classes. One of the very first things I do is I get them thinking about a past memory related to water or in a beautiful place or forest or something. And that in that way it engages that lived experience that they come in with.
I have a couple questions from the audience. I'm going to go ahead and combine these. I'm wondering if you can tell us some stories about how scientists and engineers might change or be transformed from your mode and from what you've learned. And also, given the urgency of climate change upon us in the world, how you might think about doing the work more assertively.
Assertively, yeah. First question. Well, first of all, I really like working with scientists and engineers. They seem very creative to me, and they don't always think of themselves that way. And so I'm really struck by their creativity as well as the way they articulate and the precision of their thinking. And I actually, in my global literature class, I have a lot of engineering and science students who've been putting off their lib ed requirements until they're juniors or seniors because they fear doing literature. And it is such a gift to work with them and to be able to access creativity and bring it to a narrative realm. I don't think I answered your question, Beth. That first one. Should we go to the second one, which was assertively?
The questioner about assertively also said that our task as environmentalists and scholars is in part to write and speak about those who will do something. So I think it's how to do that more assertively.
Yeah, okay, so these Borealis, is that what it, they're doing these
Boreas program.
They're doing science talks where you can practice, those of you in the sciences and engineering, you can practice talking about your insights and learning, and I think that's really important to do. And then also just really thinking about the rhetorical situations that you find yourselves in, and reaching out to a writer or someone in literature and saying, hey, I've got this insight, or I've been doing this research, and then hearing how they turn that story around to you.
I love doing that kind of partnering.
And a thank you for sharing on an engaging approach to sustainability. But this questioner wonders if you have a story of how these creations from your students and perhaps from you have been experienced by others, kind of how maybe you've amplified the work.
Oh. I'm thinking right now of Sarah. She's a student that was in my 2000, maybe 9, 10, 11, I can't remember anymore. But it was the Water Everywhere, ? Investigating and protecting our life source. Sarah, in her digital story, chose to interview her grandfather, who was the chief engineer for Pakistan for major water projects. So he had shaped a lot of the large projects in Pakistan. And Sarah had never talked to her grandfather about his work. And she was always like, you know, the good granddaughter up to that point. But she really wanted to know, what are you doing and what's going on in Pakistan? And she created a comic story that's in my book, The Changing Story. You saw some pictures of it in the story, where he explained what he'd been doing. And it was the first time they had a real conversation. And he said, at the end, he said, finally, someone in my family knows what I've been doing, what my life's mission is. And about 6 months later, he died. And so that actually became a very important part of the family. But even further, Sarah went on a couple years later, and a nonprofit organization saw her story online, because I make my websites public so that people can learn from each other, so students can learn from each other, and students can learn that their work is efficacious beyond the limits of the classroom. The nonprofit from Pakistan saw her story and asked if they could link her story to their site so that more people in Pakistan, more citizens, know about the water issues.
I think we're running short on time, but I believe that since I saw Scott Spicer sitting in the audience, who's a current Institute on the Environment educator and a librarian here at the university and a partner with Linda, that he's going to be able to share on Flipgrid some resources for those of you who might now be interested in using visual narratives and basically replicating what you've seen from Linda in your own courses and with your own students. And maybe if we have a couple moments, I've learned so much from you about the alternative of visual narratives, maybe in addition to or sometimes instead of text. I was the kind of student who liked to write, but I've learned about critical thinking and visual narrative from you, and maybe you could close with a note on pedagogy for us.
Well, thank you. Bloom's revised taxonomy talks about the different levels of learning and how memorization, moving on to writing, applying. At the top of the taxonomy is creative. So when you ask students to take a complex issue like access to clean water in India or climate change, and then to turn it around and communicate it in a multimedia realm through creating a story, you're activating the higher level thinking skills in them, and you're also accessing that visual way of learning, which young people primarily, but all of us are exposed to and involved with in our media globalized societies.
Thanks for this great conversation.
Well, thank you, Beth. Thank you all. So up next, you're going to watch Green Chemistry by Dr. Jane Wissinger. Dr. Wissinger is a distinguished university teaching professor in the Department of Chemistry on the Twin Cities campus and the director of the Organic Lab. Her close colleague, Dr. Lee Penn, will address any questions since Dr. Wissinger is abroad for sabbatical. Thank you.
For addressing society's sustainability challenges. Hi, I'm Jane Wissinger from the Department of Chemistry on the Twin Cities campus. Through this video, I hope to share how green chemistry education is essential for addressing society's sustainability challenges. I'll also share how my projects in advancing green chemistry at the U of M. What are some of the most important chemical products in your life? Take a few minutes and name 2 to your neighbor beside you. All right. If you said electronics, plastics, cosmetics, or building supplies, you are correct. These are all chemical products that improve the quality of our lives. What if I asked you what chemical products can be harmful to human health and the environment? I would bet you would come up with a list of some of the same products we had on our beneficial list. That is, plastics are essential, but we know they're polluting our oceans and waterways. Pharmaceuticals are essential, yet we're finding them in our water supplies, and we know that they can cause problems. And our beloved cell phones. There's so many metals in our cell phones. Many of them are endangered, and many of them are toxic when you try to recover them. So what can we do about these challenges? Well, for me, green chemistry is to the rescue. So what words come to mind when you think of green chemistry? Maybe you think of environmentally friendly chemistry or safer chemistry. Those are all correct. Let me give you the definition. Green chemistry is the design, development, and implementation of chemical products and processes that reduce or eliminate the use and generation of hazardous substances. That is a mouthful. In a more succinct way, you can say green chemistry is benign by design. And I want to contrast that to the environmental movement began by Rachel Carson in her seminal book Silent Spring in 1962. That brought awareness to the problems with chemicals in the environment, and we're working to clean them up and regulate, but that was not sustainable. So in 1998, there was a mind shift to green chemistry, where it sounds simple, but it is challenging. If we can prevent the pollution, then we don't need to clean it up. And so green chemistry is sustainable chemistry that thinks about the effect of chemicals on people, the planet, and it has to be economical. And it spawned great innovations in the area. So what's happening here at the University of Minnesota in green chemistry? As the Organic Chemistry Laboratory Director, I've revised the curriculum to incorporate green chemistry to bring it to the students. As a member of the Center for Sustainable Polymers, we're working to make new plastics that are from renewable feedstocks and degradable. We teach an upper division green chemistry course. I encourage you to share with any students that might be interested. And then I'm going to share 3 vignettes of other activities that expand the role of green chemistry in some outreach programs. First, I want to show you how green chemistry has a strong overlap with safety. And I wanted to present, I'd be neglectful if I didn't, the 12 principles of green chemistry you see abbreviated here. It's about waste prevention, less hazardous chemical syntheses, designing safer chemicals based on understanding toxicity more in depth, using safer solvents. So you see the word safe, safer in many of these principles, and all of them relate to improving safety. So in the Department of Chemistry and Chemical Engineering, we have a nationally recognized joint safety team. So I've been working with this joint safety team, which is student-led, and it created a marvelous culture of safety in our department to recognize green chemistry as an essential element to improving safety. According to OSHA, the most effective way to control safety is through elimination or substitution of the hazard instead of, donning up in personal protection equipment. And I'm working with Anna Sitek and DEHS to come up with green chemistry-related materials to add education, resource, and training in recognizing the contribution green chemistry can make to safety. I'm also working with our student chapter of the American Chemical Society. So as their new advisor, I'm helping them to hopefully accomplish what's called a Green Chemistry Chapter Award. And this has them doing 3 activities related to green chemistry. And they did the first this fall, where they watched a video about how to enhance awareness of plastics in the ocean. And then they made these cool figures from chitin, which is a renewable resource from crustaceans like lobster shells. So here you can see the students. It was around Halloween, so they made these bioplastic figures from chitin. And this spring, they plan to do outreach in elementary age students with sustainable chemistry. Finally, I want to share that I host a green and sustainable chemistry workshop for high school teachers in our department in the summers. We have the last 2 summers and have a third one coming up this summer. And it's a 3-day workshop where we teach high school students how they can make their labs more environmentally friendly and safety. And we've had 100% of the participants strongly agree they'd recommend this workshop to others. So I hope you will share news of this workshop if you know any high school teachers. And it's supported by the Minnesota Corn Growers Association, the NSF Center for Sustainable Polymers, and the MRSAC NSF program, the RET, Research Experience for Teachers. So, in conclusion, I hope if someone asks you what you learned at this summit, you will say, I learned about the 12 principles of green chemistry if you didn't know about them before. I'll tell you that both in my classroom and through the workshop, it is valued by students and teachers and recognized as an essential part of their education. And I hope I've convinced you, because of the connection of chemical products in our daily lives, how important it is to prepare students through green chemistry education in addressing sustainability issues in our society. Thank you. Through green chemistry education in addressing sustainability issues in our society. Thank you.
And as you already learned, Jane Wissinger is on a sabbatical, and if you would like to see Jane update you, there's a Flipgrid, a few words and a question from her. So in her stead, we have with us Dr. Lee Penn, who is going to jump in and attempt to answer our hard questions. So again, if you're in the audience or if you are joining us from any of the campuses or around the world, you can ask questions on YouTube Live, on Twitter, or on index cards. So all of these forums will be treated equally. Great. We have a first question. Are the sciences working on implementing safe and sustainable practices in labs and workplaces and spreading those practices? And I guess I would start with here at the University of Minnesota.
The answer is overwhelmingly yes.
Great.
In fact, actually, when I teach green chemistry, I'm one of the people that teaches green chemistry in the department. We have a lot of guest lecturers that come in from industry around the Twin Cities area. And we also have somebody come in from Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, for example, and a bunch of other people. And overwhelmingly, they tell us that they want students who have this training. And so they are already getting the message that we're doing this at the U, and they want our students to have this background. And so if they've taken green chemistry, or if they emphasize green chemistry and sustainability and how they craft their resume, this is a game maker for them in terms of securing a really exciting job, oftentimes. So I would overwhelmingly just be able to give it a single word answer, yes.
Wow, a spot of really good news in an area that sometimes can feel despairing. That's exciting.
Well, right. So, I mean, one of the things that we know is that handling hazardous waste is expensive. And in fact, a lot of these companies spend about the same amount of money on hazardous waste management as they do on R&D, research and development, right? So if they can even cut their costs in terms of hazard waste management, then they can devote that money towards research and development, which then, if you noticed in Jane's talk, right, she emphasized profit. If the profit's not there, if the cash money's not there, it's not going to become adopted. And so if it's an avenue by which the company can actually increase their profits, they're in. they're all in, right?
Well, dovetailing off of what you're already saying, the next question is, how do you, and I think you meaning those of us here at the university, interface with businesses, manufacturers who are interested in incorporating green chemistry into their products and to their processes? So basically, how can the private sector get more connected with this research and with maybe our students too?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. In my own research group, I have had people who have been financially supported by companies. And for example, one of my graduate students actually had funding to support his research in the area of making a greener transparent film for use in cell phones, for example. The big deal with cell phones, right, is the indium. That's one of the biggest deals because this is such a rare element on the planet. So mining for it's extremely damaging, and the indium containing glass front is so brittle and you end up breaking them frequently. My kid just broke his a week ago again, right? Yes. And so anyway, that one way that our students and our researchers on campus get connected with industry is they come to us. And there's a couple different avenues through which you can do that. One is iPrime. I don't know if you know iPrime on campus, but that is something that's connected with the MRSEC, the Materials Research Science and Engineering Center that we have on campus. A bunch of chemistry, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers are all involved in this iPrime, and these companies basically pay for a membership to be able to establish and build those connections with researchers to do non-proprietary work that then can positively impact the general field and for everyone, right? Another one is through the Institute on the Environment. I know there are some industrial partners that show up here and there. And yet another one is through funding agencies like the National Science Foundation. There's the GOLI program, which is specifically for funding partnerships between academic research groups and industrial research groups. So there's a lot of avenues for that. It's a matter of, getting it going, I guess, right? Yeah.
That goes to the next question again. The questioner wants to know how we can place environmental sustainability, green chemistry, I would say, at the center of STEM education rather than as a peripheral interest.
Yeah, this is a great question, right? It takes a long time to sort of change what a traditional major like chemistry or physics or math or chemical engineering looks like. And I think that when I teach general chemistry, for example, and when Jane's teaching OChem, which is an early chem major course, right, we are bringing sustainability into our classrooms and using it as a fundamental portion of the content knowledge that we're trying to develop, right? So you have the first law of thermodynamics, which says the energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Well, it turns out that's true for everything. All we do is move stuff around. Right? But sometimes we move it around in a way that makes it more hazardous. And so we can think about how we deliver general chemistry concepts in terms of thinking about the larger context of the system that is the planet Earth. So for example, in my green chemistry class, we talk a lot about risk as a function of exposure and hazard. So we talk about getting rid of the hazard. Okay, well, if we talk about carbon dioxide emissions, the exposure is huge, although the hazard is actually quite small. It's the size of the exposure that's such the problem. And so then that's like built right into my general chemistry course where we think about what are the reactions that occur inside of an engine that means that you drive and you generate the CO2, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, that's my approach.
There's a theme where you keep answering the next question. So
oh, okay.
The next question is...
Can I ask my own questions?
You can.
Oh, no, go ahead,
the
please.
next question is basically how does green chemistry intersect with the recent, and it's actually really a past, I would say, to the questioner, the past 3M water issue.
Oh, with the perfluorinated surfactants, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is a real, I have a policy background, this is a real policy
Sure.
question too. So the second question I'm going to ask them together is how do you get green chemistry and the kinds of teaching research you're doing to be really understandable at the policy level so that populations are protected?
Right, so first of all, with the perfluorinated surfactants question, we've made all kinds of molecules that we fundamentally believed were safe. We really thought they were safe. The perfluorinated surfactants, we really thought these things were safe. And then new information emerged. So then it's the response to the new information. We learned something new and we need to take action, right? And what I think we need to do is shorten the time frame over which action is taken. And so once we know that something is not safe, to the best of our ability, we design these chemicals. They're supposed to be super stable, etc. Once we know they're not safe, then we need to really push towards adoption of alternatives, the substitution and the elimination of Jane's inverted pyramid, right? In terms of policy, I think that we have a real responsibility in terms of science communication, but the policy people also have a real responsibility in finding us, and we have to have a two-way street. So sometimes the policymakers are like, I don't want to talk to you, and then other times they're seeking us out. And I need to seek them out in order to do that scientific communication, and they need to seek me out, and we need to have a two-way street. That's my, and I have to wrap it up because I just got the sign.
There's a final questioner who wanted to know about how those of us who are non-chemists could get involved and point our chemistry friends and colleagues towards doing the right thing with green chemistry. So I would invite you to answer that on Flipgrid, and everyone can look through
I'll do my best. And then I'm supposed to introduce the next person, right?
Yes.
Okay. I can do that. The next presentation is Teaching for Sustainable Lifestyles by Dr. Katie Chapman. Dr. Chapman is an associate professor in the Department of Math, Science, and Technology on the Crookston campus, as well as a campus sustainability coordinator. Today, she is on the Crookston campus to facilitate the in-person event. We will collect the questions you all pose, and she will respond to them on the Summit Flipgrid. Thanks.
So hello, thank you for coming to the Sustainability Education Summit. My project was starting something that I call the Sustainable Life Series. First, the purpose of the Sustainable Life Series is to broaden participation and interest in sustainability on our campus, because traditionally sustainability is viewed as a natural resources or an environmental science thing, and I want everyone to see that it's an everybody thing. So to accomplish this, I've offered a series of seminars where we have a broad array of skills that people can learn in order to live a more sustainable life. The first one was Tomato Tuesday. We had first a tomato tasting, and then people came and learned how to can tomatoes. So being able to grow and preserve your own food obviously would help one to live a more sustainable life. The next one was on National Recycling Day, and it's actually when we unveiled our green team. Taught people at that event what is and what is not recyclable on our campus. We have some restrictions compared to some of the other campuses. Talked about things that we're doing on our campus to help reduce energy use and things like that. The next event that we did last fall was what we called Sustainability and Art. This was a partnership with my office, the International Programs of Diversity. And so what we did is the places that Study Abroad was going to, we had teas from those places that were fair trade, sustainably harvested. We highlighted the communities where those teas were grown so that people could learn a little about communities they might be able to go to on a study abroad trip. We did art pieces from things from nature, so seeds, leaves. Then we moved into spring. The first one was kombucha, learning how to make kombucha. So we set it up on January 23rd, and then we came back February 1st. And they got to taste it, and we also made spaghetti on that day from the canned tomatoes we had made in the fall semester. And while they were tasting and eating their spaghetti, one of our faculty members in the business department talked about living within your means and making green choices while you're shopping. The next one is called Knitting Thursdays. This group gets together, learns how to knit. We're going to be learning how to spin and dye natural fibers and that kind of thing. Then we did another one, Cloth versus Disposable Diapering. Did that with the Child Center and invited people in from the community, gave people that came a free cloth diaper if they wanted one. We had a panel of moms that do cloth diaper, and then again Kara Bowen came and gave the financials about how much money you can save while cloth diapering. Then we started a battery recycling program on our campus, and so we did an event telling people how to safely recycle batteries and where they could do it on our campus, and then how to do it at home. Followed by sort of our finale, which was Earth Week. On Monday we made kokedama balls, so those are plant balls that are in burlap and moss covering, so there's nothing plastic on them. You can, if the plant dies, just throw it out in the ground and it's fine. The next day we did the ABCs of tree ownership, so we had Rick Abrahamson, one of our horticulture professors, talk about how to properly take care of a tree once you have planted one, and then we gave away some oak seedlings for people to plant. The next one was a partner with a One Vegetable One Community. Learned about the plant of the year, which was squash last year, and how to cook with that. The next day we had Trey Everett and our facilities head, Dave Danforth, talk about sustainable building design. We did it from a standpoint of large buildings like the Twin Cities campus, our campus, and then from a standpoint of small buildings. Friday night we had a movie night. Farmers for America talks about the changes in farming that have occurred over the years, and then some of the things that are occurring to try to make farming in general more sustainable. And then we ended with a cleanup of downtown in the city of Crookston. And along with all of this, we had a haiku competition where students and faculty could submit a haiku poem and win a contest. However, it was well written and also related to earth and the environment and sustainability. This fall, we started our series with a grafting demonstration. So one of the students in the club is a horticulture major, and she showed everybody several techniques on how to graft. We did apples. You have multiple varieties of apples on the same tree. We did an event with the art club, paint a recycle bin. This was actually able to add recycling bins to our outdoor athletic events like the football games, the soccer games. Next, we did sustainable Thanksgiving. So there are often lots of leftovers associated with Thanksgiving, so instructions on how to use common leftover ingredients to create new things that you could eat. And that is the end of what we've done so far.
I know I learned a lot of activities I'll do at home now. So as we said, Katie is in Crookston right now helping facilitate the event there. So it will take about 2 minutes or so. If you have some questions, think of them, write on your index card, YouTube, Twitter, Flipgrid, all the places for it. And we'll collect them, and then Katie will respond after the summit. If I had some waiting music, I'd play it. Okay, write down your last thoughts. Fortunately, you can keep sending in questions. We'll always be monitoring the YouTube live chat and the Twitter and the Flipgrid. So if you send in your questions for her even later today or tomorrow, we'll still have the opportunity for her to answer them. So now I'd like to introduce the next presenter. The next INE educator who will be talking is a presentation about renewable energies and experiential education. And this is by Dr. Paul Imbertson. Dr. Imbertson is a teaching professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here on the Twin Cities campus. Enjoy his presentation.
Hi, I'm Paul Imbertson. I teach engineering at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. I'd like to show you something. I hope you can see that the paper's spinning quite fast. We have just made a motor in under 30 seconds, the 30-second motor. When I first showed this to students 15, 20 years ago, they all leaned in, staring intently at the phenomena. Lorna said, "This looks like magic, but this is better than magic. You can do something with this." We unpacked the demonstration and we deduced the principles by which all motors and generators work. And the students began talking. They said, "If we can make a motor out of scrap parts, we could make a generator out of scrap parts. And if we can make a generator out of scrap parts, anyone, anywhere in the world can make a generator out of scrap parts, hook it up to a wind turbine or a hydro system, and generate renewable electricity in places that have never had electricity before. It is no exaggeration to say that this little demonstration has launched 15 years of student engagement in STEM outreach and renewable energy implementation. This little demonstration has brought people together and launched activities in Ethiopia, Kenya, Norway, China, Mexico, Nicaragua, across the Twin Cities, and throughout Minnesota. Dozens of people have worked with me on this, and I would like to introduce 3 of them now. Anders Sonnenberg, engineer, Dr. Angela Asuji, high school science teacher, and Asma Ahmed, engineering student.
Hello, I'm Anders Sonnenberg. I live here in Minnesota with my family just west of the Twin Cities here in the town of Independence. I'm an electrical engineer and a project manager for Michaud Cooley Erickson. For the project that Paul and I were involved in together was called the BRIDGE project, acronym standing for Building Resources and Innovative Design for Global Energy. It's a big concept, but we wanted to go for it. Nonetheless, the student group coalesced around a well-defined issue of socioeconomic disparity in the farming communities of Nicaragua, as well as offered us an opportunity to design and develop an innovative solution, but it had to be sustainable. The BRIDGE project and many projects just like it caused us to deeply investigate those elements of sustainability, to identify them, and then develop ways to support them, to address those elements of sustainability. And I think that's the takeaway lesson here. Identify the elements of sustainability and then develop the best way to address those elements of sustainability. They can be either your markers for success, or each one could be a single mode of failure for a project like this. It's not a cheap lesson. It's one that could be applied to both our professional and personal lives.
My name is Angela Suji. I am a physics and chemistry teacher with the Minneapolis Public School. For over a period of 4 years, Paul and my students worked together to design and implement a BRIDGE project. My students and his students designed and created a prototype of a windmill. And the idea was for this windmill to be used in Nicaragua to help power a water pump that has the potential to then generate water for the people in Nicaragua. The learning was authentic, the interaction was sustained, and in the process, my students not only learned science and engineering concepts and practices, they also learned about interaction and interaction patterns. They learned about systems thinking. They formed friendship through collaboration, and also learn how to partner to solve a global problem. At each stage of the project, Paul emphasized the idea of sustainability. Sustainability in terms of interactions with the students, sustainability in terms of material and material usage and material management, and also sustainability in terms of the product.
Hello, so my name is Esma Ahmed. I am a 4th year student at the University of Minnesota studying mechanical engineering, and I'm also serving as the programs coordinator for our chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers, where we are lucky enough to have Paul Embertson serve as our chapter advisor. He's pretty phenomenal. And so lately we've been working with Paul on a renewable energy project, and this project has 3 main objectives. The first is to identify and enhance sustainable energy solutions that work well in Africa. And the second is to construct physical embodiments of these solutions and to place them in an establishment where communities and individuals can come and can tinker with these ideas and perhaps choose one that works well for them. And the third objective is to carry out the phases of implementation and assessment for each patron in each community that chooses to work with us. Now, this project really means a lot to me as an individual because it allows me to grapple with concepts such as sustainability and economic growth and really think about the intersection of the two. It also gives me and other undergraduate students that are involved the opportunity to hone our technical and communication skills, which are both very transferable and are absolutely needed to carry out any successful project in any industry, really. And more generally, actually, I think it's important for undergraduates and for millennials to think about sustainability and to educate themselves about it because it will give them the ideas and the ability to promote a healthier ecosystem that can both protect our biodiversity and make significant impacts on the technological advancements in the modern world. Thank you.
The 30-second motor is still running. We're still fascinated. We're still leaning in. And when we lean in, we bump shoulders. And when we bump shoulders, we begin to build relationships. These relationships are the true prize. With these relationships, we become partners in our journey towards a sustainable future. It has been my pleasure to share this story. Thank you for your time.
Thanks to the Twitterverse, you are sending questions on Twitter. Keep that up, and I will ask them on my phone. So, we've got a hard one off of Twitter. When thinking about inequality in Nicaragua from your location in the U.S., how are students enabled to engage with the complex socio-political history between Nicaragua and the U.S. that has contributed to the inequalities?
Yeah, how are any of us, we might ask. We bring people together. Are they prepared? No. Am I prepared? No. It's a difficult situation, but we try to get the people together. So the goal when my students show up in Nicaragua, in fact, I'll tell you a story that maybe highlights what this interaction is. We want to build relationships. Two stories. The first is what sets this up. A friend of mine leads groups to Guatemala quite often to do aid work in communities. And she was leading a group one time, and they went to the end of the road, grabbed gear, and they grabbed their hammers and all their equipment and started hiking into this community. And one of the participants turned to Janet and says, "Janet, what are we building?" He's thinking, they're building a church, they're building a school, they're building a house, they're building a latrine. And she turned to him and said, "We're building relationships." And that changed the whole tone of the trip. It wasn't about we're here to do this or this or this or this, except we are here to build this relationship. This is the principle that we impressed on the students. And I could tell you, it was maybe the second time we were down there in Nicaragua, and it was quite a few years ago. And we showed up in Nicaragua in this small community, and people had heard we were going to be there, these engineering students from the United States. And one gentleman showed up, Adrian Estrada. He showed up because he just wanted to see what was going on, an older gentleman. He was curious to see what we were up to. And he and I would just sort of sit around and watch the students, my students and the Nicaraguans work, building a wind turbine and taking time doing this and that. And Adrian was always joking. He spoke no English. I spoke very little Spanish, but we could somehow communicate. And he was real fun. He's a fun guy. He is really a joker. And so a day, 2 days, and he's joking. And one day, we're sitting there watching the students, and he gets very quiet. And he stares at my students, and I'm thinking, something's wrong here. He's mad about something. I said something, they did something, there's something happened. And he's staring and staring. And he calls Mario over, because Mario can interpret. And he talks to Mario for a while. Mario turns to me and says, "Paul, Adrian says he has something very important to tell you." That's why he called me over so we can get it right. And he said, "Adrian says he came here to see what would happen when he realized there was these engineering students from the United States coming down. And he was quite sure he knew what was going to happen. He was quite sure that when my students showed up from the United States, They would preach, and they would show, and they would have fancy equipment, and they would take a bow, pat themselves on the back, and leave. And Adrian said, okay, that's fine. We'll take from that what we can, but that's all it'll be. But he said instead he saw something completely different. Our students, he saw our students engaging with the Nicaraguans, learning from them, sharing with them, building true relationships. And he said, you know, you didn't bring anything fancy to show us. You didn't bring us a solution. You just brought yourselves. And you opened yourselves up, and the Nicaraguans opened themselves up and built this relationship. And that's what it's been ever since then. Since that time, I guess I'm going on in this answer. Since that time, there's at least 2 Nicaraguan teenagers at the time who would show up and work with us, who say because of our students going there and opening up and building their relationships, they're now engineers. They decided to go on to engineering school because of that interaction. Engineers working in Managua. There's great outcomes from building these relationships.
All right, so I want to turn to sustainability, and I have the same question as one of the questioners here. Your former student or colleague, Anders Sonnenberg, referenced the elements of sustainability, and then I also noticed that in Angela Asuji's talk within your presentation, that she mentioned relationships, materials, and products, and said they all needed to be sustainable. So are those the element? What are the elements of sustainability? Dr. Imberton.
Yeah, Ione, what are the elements of sustainability? I think we're working on that, and we kind of know. It is materials. It is the process, and it is the relationships. It's all of those things. In the end of the day, it's what allows us to be doing something in 10 years that we want to be doing, and continually. So in terms of materials, we're working on designing, and I got groups working on it right now, things that can be made from what you can find so people can do it on the ground. We've gone back to communities in Nicaragua after being there once and then maybe again 3 years later. And there was one community, we had put up a wind turbine, and a little boy, about 8, runs up with this homemade wind turbine, really a pinwheel, but it was very intricate. And he was showing me where the blade twisted, and it had this, you know how the wind turbine blades, it's not just bent, it has a wind to it. And he was showing me the wind to it. He had figured out that you have to have this wind because it's a rotating device. And this 8-year-old boy is probably 18 years old at this point. I'd like to track him down and find out what he's up to. But this is the sustainability of the relationship as well. I could tell you other stories about these relationships that go on. But it is also the material, so that, and this is the key part, if it's something that we don't have to bring in, which always entails bringing a little bit of Minnesota culture in as well, when they don't need our culture. If you have to bring it in, you're always changing something there. But if you just share concepts like, how do you build a motor in 30 seconds? I can do this too. Then it can grow from there in place.
All right, and I have a question. I'm really interested in the work of the National Society of Black Engineers, which seems to be both focused on sustainable development, basically economic development to alleviate poverty, as well as an environmental mindset. And can you just say more about the organization, if people are interested in their work, maybe how they could be in touch? And is that, an overall focus?
Yes, the National Society of Black Engineers, it's a big group. So go to Detroit in March. There'll be 35,000 people there. Maybe not quite. That's their convention. And it's just amazing to see this happen. It's about all aspects of the professional and social and communal life of black engineers and trying to promote this. And I've been their advisor for 15 years at least now. Going to one of their dinners tonight, actually. I have to remember to put on good shoes. I forgot to do that, so I'll work that out. One unique thing, since we're out of time, the University of Minnesota chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers is comprised of students primarily from Africa, not African American, which is why the National Society of Black Engineers in University of Minnesota would like to pair up with Africa, go back home basically, and build these relationships with the Africans, so then they can also build stronger relationships with the African Americans here.
Fantastic. I would like to remind everyone to ask more questions on, and then Dr. Imbertson will answer them later. And yes, now we are introducing our...
I just have to find the right card here. The final presentation, thank you very much. The final presentation is Art and Science, Education for Social Justice by Dr. David Searing. Dr. Searing is an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology on the Duluth campus. He is, however, here.
Artists and scientists are not as different as popular stereotypes suggest. People raised in U.S. society receive a steady diet of inaccurate images about both the arts and the sciences. The illusions these images create undermine our individual and collective abilities to cultivate transdisciplinary thinking. We need to recommit to the kinds of arts and sciences thinking upon which humans have so long depended for our survival. The dynamic world we live in requires us to see how our human actions have impacts that far exceed the disciplinary boundaries that are currently the dominant mode in our thinking and in our educations. My project as an IONE educator is to create a course exploring the intersections of arts, sciences, social sciences, and humanities for sustaining society. It's clear that artistic and scientific approaches to thinking and problem solving need to be brought together more powerfully and more holistically than our current educational models are doing. Over more than a dozen years of anthropological fieldwork, I've worked with an indigenous community, the Saraguros of Highland, Ecuador. Virtually everyone in Saraguro is an artist and a scientist, a careful observer of the natural and social worlds they inhabit, and a maker of the things that living a good life requires. Spinning yarn, weaving, beadwork, wood carving, caring for animals, minding the weather, planting corn, making music, dancing, storytelling, drawing and painting. These are the activities that define daily life for so many of my Saraguro friends. As managers of natural resources and sustainable farmers, my friends are holistic scientist artists. They remind me that for many societies, there are no strong distinctions between the arts and the sciences. For years, the mural on the main square of Saraguro read, "Only together can we realize the dreams of everyone." This idea for me sparks a desire to understand better how the arts and sciences, together with indigenous ways of knowing, can work to realize the dream of a sustainable, just society. But I think we've gone far out of balance when, for example, an entire elementary school in Duluth is organized around STEM education to such a degree that they literally have no art education for elementary kids. Artist, educator, and organizer Miri Villiard was recently hired as a consultant to infuse art into this school's science-based garden program.
They only do STEM, so they don't have any arts curriculum at all in the school. And so in order to bring art to the kids, the assistant principal contacted me, and under their garden program and under the landscaping budget was like, hey, can you help facilitate a collaborative art project with the fourth graders that also incorporates, history on indigenous people in the area, because, we built this garden on this land, and the kids are super excited and super knowledgeable about all the science aspect of it. But now we want to beautify it, but we want it to be also meaningful, and we want to incorporate it as an arts education too.
This is how the arts in U.S. culture are so often brought in as an extra add-on to what's considered the real work of STEM education. It's also not an accident, I think, that indigenous culture is lumped in there with the arts as an add-on. This marginalization is a disaster for our local, regional, and global cultures, and for creative problem solving on the numerous wicked problems we currently face. Let me share an example of a problem solved through an integrated artistic and scientific imagination. Maybe you've heard of Florence Nightingale. If we remember her as a compassionate nurse who cared for injured soldiers. This is a nice mythic image, but it's such a simplification that it undermines her real significant contributions to science and the creative art of visualizing information. She certainly performed as a nurse caring for the wounded, but she was also a clear-eyed scientist and administrator keeping careful track of deaths in battle, deaths from wounds, and deaths from follow-on infections. She found that in any given month, 6 to 10 times as many men were dying in field hospitals than during battle. She submitted a report to Parliament advocating for reforms in sanitation. 6 months later, the British government had not acted on her recommendations. This is when Nightingale's artistic imagination intervened. The rose diagram she invented intellectually and viscerally communicates her scientific findings. The red and black indicate men killed in battle. The blue areas indicate the men who died from secondary infections. Shortly after this approach to conveying her findings went public, the British government sent a sanitation commission to Crimea. Because of her ability to envision and practice both scientific data collection and creative artistic imagination, thousands of men survived to live their lives. Today, we need a similar fusion of arts and science thinking in our complex world that desperately needs a new paradigm for education, one tied to the holistic imagination that has led humans to thrive for so many millennia. To prepare for this course, I am talking to artists, scientists, and educators from a wide range of disciplines. I'll wrap up this brief introduction to my IONE project with a selection of thoughts from the people I've been talking to.
There's this notion that scientists aren't creative, which bothers me because I feel like everything I do every day is creativity. But I get to ask interesting questions about the way the world around me works and then figure out how to answer those questions and then communicate them. And if that isn't creative expression, I don't know what is.
Are the arts and sciences connected? Why and why not? Yes, they're connected, as we've said, because of critical inquiry, discovery, curiosity, questioning. It's about understanding the world.
The way you approach science and the way you approach art are very similar. Artists really use the scientific method. They don't put that label on it, but we do. You have a posit, you explore it a little bit, and you tweak one thing at a time and see what happens, see what the result is, and then you change your posit and then keep doing that and discover along the way.
I plan to publish the full conversations by the end of this year and offer a course informed by these ideas in the spring of 2020. I have to take a picture of everybody here so you can all be on Twitter. Wave.
That's great.
There we go.
You can still ask questions on Twitter or on Flipgrid. But I have one I just really want to ask because I love that picture of the mural, which you've shared with some of the other INE educators, so I know it's something on your mind a lot as you do your work. And I'm wondering if that mural reads, "Only together can we realize the dreams of everyone." Do you think this kind of communal approach to sustainability is necessary, essential to the work?
Absolutely. I don't think we're going to get there in any other way, really. I mean, Paul's comments about the relationships, it's about the relationships that are possible. So yes, that's the root of what I think is the approach.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a harder one. I think many of us probably kind of felt the hairs on the back of our neck bristle or when you talked about how indigenous cultures are lumped in with the arts. I think in our K-12 system maybe and in the educational system is what you were meaning, but perhaps it has a broader social meaning too. And I'm wondering how that affects our capacity to work on sustainability if we make that kind of conflation. in our society.
Can you expand that a little bit? What do you
Well, I think what you're trying to convey to us and your friends in Seguro is that there are ways of knowing that are not limited to the duality of arts and sort of a Western construct. So if it's lumped into arts.
Yeah, so, as an anthropologist, I've spent most of my career working with indigenous communities. And as I say, there's not a distinction between the different disciplines. People learn the things they need to in order to live a good life. And in anthropology, there's been a recent sort of interest in what's called the ontological term, which is really realizing that we don't, in fact, all live in the same world. We have different ways of seeing the world that have real material effects on how we interact with each other, how we interact with the natural resources that we live within. And really paying attention to that is something that our educational system's not been very good at and absolutely needs in order to... One of my favorite writers, poets, William Stafford, talks about when he's doing his work helping students learn how to write and think, he says, you have to harness all the sled dogs and you have to bring everything to the table. And I think given the scale and the challenges that we've gotten to, because our society thinks particular ways, it's absolutely essential that we have to pay attention and honor and take seriously ways of being and ways of thinking that are not present for us currently in our educational system.
Fantastic. I have another question of my own. Some folks in the room know that I served on a city council. I'm not currently serving on city council, but I did for 2 terms. So I did a lot of door knocking. And I had an idea about livability and what it meant to be, committing to your community before I did all of that door knocking. And then after I did it, it changed and it became more local and specific. And I continued to just have ideas from people who really differed from me sometimes that I would meet at the door that inform how I continue to think about these issues of sustainability in ways I just never could have expected. So I'm envisioning that you had some real transformation from those interviews, and I'm wondering if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah. So the interviews that I'm having, and I'm still in the process of doing them, there's a profound way of shaking one's own paths of thinking to sit down and really look into another person's eyes and listen to their way of approaching a question. And one of the things that I think often happens is that we tend to think of diversity as something that's like those sprinkles on the coffee that's extra. And in fact, what it is it fundamentally can reshape how you think and what you think about to actually listen to another person deeply. And so anthropologists tend to be deep listeners. That's what we do. We're professional deep listeners. And sitting down across from these scientists and these artists and these educators and my indigenous friends, I no longer sort of think anything about what my thoughts are. It's about what the thinking is that can unfold together. I don't know, maybe that's too philosophical, but that's how it transforms everything that I do in my work.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the really hard question now. So I know that there are many colleagues here at the university who are part of the environmental humanities group, and I think you probably see yourself as part of that. And sometimes there's a critique that's out there about environmental humanities, that it focuses on methodology and on asking deep questions and making time for the answers to come up, and that might sit in tension with I think the New York Times says we have 12 or maybe 14 years left to address climate change before, I believe they say it's too late. So do we have time for the environmental humanities? I said it was hard.
My response to that would be, we've been living on fast thinking for a couple of centuries as a global society, and how's that working out for us? I think we have to have the time to think together and pay attention to the ways that our blinders get put on us when we don't ask the kinds of questions that the environmental humanities asks. When we don't ask the kind of questions that indigenous societies demand that we ask of the global systems that we live in. We have to take that time. We have the time that we can, a colleague of mine talks about your presence is your competence. We have to bring our presence to the key issues that are real in the world. And we need all the sled dogs to do that.
Okay, we have a couple questions. You have a couple minutes left. Can storytelling as a mode of knowing work to build cultural humanity in our education system? So storytelling. And then can you talk a bit about sustainability, indigenous cultures or culture, and time?
Oh, those are both more than the 1 minute I have left.
Yeah. Remember, there's Flipgrid.
But I will try to grapple with some of those on Flipgrid. I certainly don't speak for indigenous culture or for storytelling. There are many modes of storytelling, but we all do that kind of storytelling in every facet of our lives. And I think sustainability education is a space where we can make that more present in a way that will change minds, hearts, and bodies into the beings that we need to become to make sustainable societies happen. That's what I have time to say right now.
No, seriously, there are some really thoughtful answers to questions like these on Flipgrid. So, I mean, it's a fast sort of tech forum, but it's also a way for us to see each other, hear from each other, sort of capture some of the emotion. So I do encourage those of you viewing online in all seriousness to make use of that forum, because it's a way we can try to be sustainable in building our relationships by not always having to fly everywhere. Although I think there's a value, Minnesota students out there, in getting out to another place and experiencing it, even if it has a carbon impact.
I want to just say, I want to make a shout out to the tech people who are making this happen. You talk about Flipgrid. This is amazing to pull this off. So.
Thank you. And on that note, I thought I was going to hand the mic to Peter.
Okay. I hope you're enjoying all the presentations. I just want to thank again all the educators. My job outside of this summit is working with them year-round for the 15-month fellowship. I get to listen to David tell me about storytelling and social change, and Linda and her digital storytelling, green chemistry, and experiential engineering, and sustainability in my everyday from Katie. So it's a privilege that we get to have the Institute Environment to work with you all. And this summit really, from them, David was like, we got to make this interactive and online. We can do this innovative summit. And so with Dustin, our IT, and other support, that's what we're doing today. So thanks for engaging with it on Twitter, Flipgrid, online, YouTube Live. We're doing something new, and we're giving you a nice pilot run. And then Linda said, we should just visit all of these Minnesota campuses. And we're like, okay, we can try to do that. So the next section is campus visits, place-based education. All of the Morris, Duluth, Crookston, and the Twin Cities have all prepared short videos showing how they teach sustainability through their care for the land. And you'll get a glimpse to see what these places are like, especially if you're an attendee in Paris, France, or the person who's watching from China, or the neighbors up in Canada. You'll be able to see what these campuses in Minnesota are like. But before that, we'll give you some time to go to the bathroom and have an intermission. So at 2 o'clock, we'll come back. But to keep you engaged and thinking about sustainability, we have some interactive polls that will be on here for if you want to text an answer in person or online. It'll show you responses. There's just questions about sustainability. And then we'll come back and enjoy the visits to the other campuses. Thank you. Okay, thank you for coming back and joining us. Dustin, are we back online? Sure. Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us, and the people who were on the polls. It's fun to see your thoughts, and we're able to collect those and share them with you later, and I hope you got a snack and everything you needed. Okay, so now we're going to do what we were just talking about. We're going to go visit these campuses across Minnesota, the 4 videos, and these videos were made through collaboration with the Office of Sustainabilities at those different campuses and student workers there. So thank you all who worked really hard to make these videos. So the order of the videos you'll be seeing is Duluth, Morris, Crookston, and Twin Cities. These will be played right after another, so you are now at your half hour of viewing pleasure of seeing sustainability taught through our care use of the land. It's a place-based education. And then afterwards, we will get into the closing activity, which myself and the event coordinators on the in-person events will describe. And online, the conversation will continue on the Flipgrid. So thank you all for participating here, online, through the multiple medias. And I hope you enjoy these presentations.
Our changing climate and the way we use energy is one of the big challenges of our time. I feel like I have a mandate every morning that I get up. I feel like this is my way of making the world a better place for my children and for everybody's children. This is just one of those problems that's going to have to be solved, and the sooner we do it, the better it is for everybody around the world.
Duluth Shines is a program that pairs UMD engineering students from mechanical and civil classes with local organizations to study real-world sustainability projects. Students investigate projects with their clients, from energy efficiency upgrades to solar photovoltaic systems, stormwater runoff projects, and a lot more. The university and community partnerships provide an exciting project that benefits both the client and allows students to test their knowledge but also sharpen their professional skills.
We're a group of students from across campus, so an interdisciplinary group, and we basically all got together and said we wanted to see more solar. We looked at different pathways to solar, and one of the biggest barriers was funding. So we asked our fellow students and our student body for funding for solar, and we're granted that. I mean, we went to all kinds of different committee meetings with pictures and posters, and so it was interesting to see how that kind of happens. We learned about making maintenance plans and working with our local utilities, so it was a pretty great experience. And so there's a lot more to come in the next couple of years, and I see great things for UMD and sustainability at UMD. I really believe that this is something that's right and that is good not only for UMD but just for our greater community, and I think that that's an important thing to be able to have those discussions with people about things you're passionate about.
A trash audit is basically literally going through the trash meant for the landfill, weighing that out, and then sorting it to see how much could be recycled, how much could be composted, and then weighing that and looking at, just the raw data of that.
UMD's sustainable management students rolled up their sleeves and sorted a day's worth of trash from the Labovitz School of Business and Economics. The audit sparked action. New recycling and compost signs were added, waste bins were upgraded for consistency, and now they're piloting a program to remove standalone trash bins from the classrooms, forcing everyone to sort items properly at the nearest 3-bin waste station.
Hydroponics is an unconventional form of sustainable agriculture. This summer, a group of students collaborated at the UMD Land Lab to grow lettuce in a more efficient hydroponic system. They used a modified deep water culture system with 2 troughs of nutrient solution aerated with water pumps and air stones. Students learned the importance of having and maintaining a sustainable relationship with our natural resources in the Great Lakes region. Additionally, they learned the importance of balancing local economic demand and production, as well as the value of supporting a thriving local food system.
The UMD Sustainability Virtual Tour was developed by a GIS student working through the Geospatial Analysis Center. The project allows anyone to access the various ways UMD incorporates sustainability into our operations and infrastructure. Things like green building features, solar projects, waste reduction, and stormwater features on campus. Even if you can't get to campus to take a tour, you can still learn about it online. This project challenged students in a Sustainable Art Studio course to investigate the issue of bird strikes on campus windows, then find a way to use art to mitigate them. Students researched potential designs, were mentored by 3 local artists, and were supported by Wildwoods, a community nonprofit. Ultimately, the window mural they created allowed students to experience both design and installation of an art piece, while also helping local bird populations. The UMD Environmental Education Department prepares educators to teach about sustainability. Taking advantage of place-based learning, they offer field experiences in the Northwoods of Minnesota through coursework in outdoor education methods, outdoor recreation, and young children, nature, and sustainability. Education for sustainability happens in a lot of places at UMD. It's everywhere. Students can really personalize and find their own pathway in whatever major or interest they have.
As a public university whose history is tied to the land, it matters that we find a way to celebrate the place we inhabit and all the peoples who have lived here. From the indigenous peoples who hunted and fished our lakes and forests, to the European immigrants who later farmed the rich prairie soil. We also feel a responsibility to the generations to come who will depend on our stewardship for their survival. Today, we at the University of Minnesota Morris utilize on-site resources from wind, sun, and biomass to drastically reduce our carbon footprint. We are one of the first college campuses in the world to do so, as evidenced by the recognitions we earn, from the Environmental Protection Agency to the Princeton Review. At the same time, we offer students the opportunity to pursue research projects and to study the liberal arts within a framework of environmental sustainability, both in and beyond the classroom. Our model of sustainability inspires a broad range of initiatives that are redefining the ways in which energy is produced and used, and the ways in which young people understand their role as citizens in a changing environment. One part of the story rises dramatically above the banks of the Pomme de Terre River, just east of town. Steady prairie winds make Morris an ideal location for wind turbines.
On a windy day, these turbines provide 100% of our electrical energy. Our combined heat and power plant uses the corn cobs behind me as fuel. We purchased these cobs from a local farmer, and there's approximately 600 tons here, which equates to an additional $50,000 of income for the farmer. These cobs come from only 750 acres of corn and will run our campus for heating and cooling for approximately 30 days.
So some days the wind isn't blowing very much and our wind turbines don't produce very much electricity. But that's where students jump in, playing a greater role in furthering campus sustainability initiatives. Right now, I'm working on a solar installation for our campus, so we might achieve carbon neutrality. Morris is a leader in sustainability innovation, and that innovation, I think, is driven by students.
With this in mind, we encourage new thinking about energy and resources.
Creating a sustainable community means asking a really big question: what sustains us? From the time we get up in the morning to the time we get to bed, we're making decisions that impact future generations, as well as the environmental services that support us.
Since 2013, a new residence hall provides round-the-clock support for an engaged community of 72 students, extending Morris's liberal arts mission and expanding its thriving sustainability initiatives. The LEED Design facility invests in a sustainable future by encouraging green community outreach and by offering students leadership opportunities beyond the classroom. Our campus is a lab for green living. Students, faculty, and staff work together to find sustainable solutions, like campus-wide composting, to the challenges facing our world. For example, Morris has diverted over 27 tons of food waste in the last 2 years, and will continue to divert over 20 more tons each year.
So instead of taking our waste to the incinerator and thinking of our waste as trash, we can actually make it into compost, which becomes a valuable soil amendment for our campus.
At Morris, green initiatives take place across the liberal arts curriculum, in a new environmental science major, and in places you might not expect.
Fashion Trashin works with the idea of using found objects, but taking the idea of something so thrown away and making something wearable and beautiful out of it that can be shown in a runway show. It gives the students the ultimate challenge of taking something that's forgotten and beyond its purpose and giving it a whole new life.
For younger children, the initiatives continue with a new play, Sophie and the Adventures of Ice Island.
Everyone can help. Plus, once the island stops melting, it doesn't have to be going all the time, only when you need it.
Well, then what are we waiting for? Let's go.
Our work matters to the region and to those who live and learn here. We stay true to our public mission by providing space in which the pursuit of knowledge and understanding of sustainability permeate the work we do.
Our focus on sustainable energy in Morris is part of a conversation, and it's a conversation about how we should live in the present, how we should live in the future. It involves scientists and artists and engineers, and most importantly, it's a conversation that we should all be part of.
If you have ever been to Morris, you know you're getting close when you spot the 2 wind turbines on the hill. What you might not know is that dispersed throughout town are a multitude of solar arrays. Residents here understand that by harvesting the power of the sun, they can help people, the environment, and even cows. Starting at the University of Minnesota Morris campus is a 20 kilowatt photovoltaic array next to the Green Prairie dorm. A photovoltaic, or PV array, converts solar energy into electricity. All electricity produced by these panels directly supplies the dorm. Right next to the campus at the Regional Fitness Center, solar thermal panels use the sun's rays to heat the recreational swimming pool year-round. These kinds of panels have fluids circulating through them that transfers heat captured by the sun into the pool water. Up the hill at the West Central Research and Outreach Center, there are also PV panels.
So the array in the cow pasture is 30 kilowatts. And there's sort of 2 reasons for putting the array there. One is to provide shade for cows, and the dairy program will do some studying to see if that shade actually changes cows' behavior or changes milk production, things like that. And then the second reason for, maybe even the primary reason for putting them there, is it's providing electricity for electric fast charger, a DC fast charger for electric cars. It's a 50 kilowatt charger. It can charge an electric car up to about 80% of its maximum battery life in about 30 to 40 minutes.
Some of the biggest advocates for more solar energy in Morris are the members of the high school FIRST robotics team, the Plaid Pillagers. The team is working to install a solar PV array at the local high school. Some people are curious as to how this array could benefit the community as a whole.
Okay, so for one, it would improve the carbon footprint of our high school. For 2, it would lower the electric bills of the high school, and the saved money would actually go into our team's annual budget. And it would also encourage education within the science department because they could use the production data and the panels themselves within the classrooms. And it also allows us to have engagement with the Morris model.
The team started fundraising at the beginning of this year by hosting community engagement events and applying for grants, and have already reached 75% of their goal. Across town, in City Hall, the City of Morris is also looking into installing solar PV onto its municipal buildings. Being a part of the clean energy transition is something that's important to the City of Morris.
The electrification of infrastructure and transportation is coming, and it's coming fast. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to get ahead of that. So the idea that we could put solar on all of our buildings in order to produce our own energy and offset what we're using inside the building, plus reducing the amount of energy that we use actually by the things that we do, that's the future. That's what we need to do.
With all of these solar projects going on, the City of Morris is excited to continue being a leader in clean energy across the state. This excitement is shared by community members, local students, farmers, and also the cows.
Traditionally, sustainability is viewed as a natural resources or an environmental science thing. And I want everyone to see that it's an everybody thing. It's not just the tree huggers, but everybody that has a role in sustainability.
I'm Christopher Lang. I'm a software engineering student here at UMC. Over the past months, I've developed this system where you can record recycling and trash data using the Raspberry Pi and output it to the screen so we can keep track of it as well as people can see it. But in addition, users can put in their items, say what they're recycling, and earn points through the touchscreen, and then we can provide rewards for doing the right thing. So for example, a user would create their PIN, and then they can type it in, and then they can say what they're going to recycle, so a couple glass bottles and some plastic bottles. Then you'd click confirm, and then you'd have your points. That's not worth that many points, we just have lots of points on this test account already, and then you can spend them, and then it takes you back to the main screen and you can move on, and then it sends the sustainability system an email saying that somebody would like to claim a prize.
Well, we do have an aquaponics system here, and we kind of built it ourselves. Right now there's 33 tilapia in the fish portion, and we also circulate that fish water to lettuce plants, and some students are doing some research. Right now the lettuce is needing to be harvested, and it will start another go-round. We're going to include probably some hydroponic production of lettuce as well, and maybe even some soil production of lettuce. Well, in a lot of my courses, and a lot of our courses here at UMC, we do teach about sustainable issues. It's like in my greenhouse courses, where some greenhouses will reclaim their used water, they put it on their plants, they capture that water, and then they reuse that. We also talk about hydroponics and aquaponics, how that's recirculated nutrient solutions. Some greenhouses will collect rainwater and use that as part of their water. So I mean, it really depends on the greenhouse itself. So we're always talking about those sustainability issues in my horticultural courses, because for one, students are interested in that, and we need to be looking towards more sustainable ways to do production.
The main sustainability emphasis that Facilities and Operations has had on the University of Minnesota Crookston campus is still reduction in our energy usage. In the last 5 years, our average annual total kilowatt hour usage has dropped by 2.5 million kilowatt hours average. This information was obtained from our Otter Tail Power Company Power Profiler Usage Report. That's about a 20% reduction in consumption. We have done this by changing our interior and exterior lighting to LEDs, putting energy controls on our teaching lab fume hoods, and upgrading building heating, ventilation, and air conditioning control systems, and starting to put motion and daylight sensors on lighting in our academic buildings. The second project was the installation of a Level 2 electric vehicle charging station that can be utilized by university students, faculty, and staff, as well as the public. A future project that is being considered is the addition of solar walls on 2 of our buildings to preheat air that is brought into our fresh air intakes to help reduce the amount of energy that we need from our central heating plant. As we look at new building projects, we also continue to look at solar, much like the 19 kilovolt system on our wellness center, and trying to incorporate some wind solutions.
Hey, this is Reed with the University of Minnesota Green Team, presenting at the men's basketball game, reminding everybody to reduce, reuse, and recycle. At halftime, we're getting students more involved by playing games like sustainable basketball.
Sustainable basketball from one
leaving a better planet for our children.
What comes out of a system is equal to what goes into it.
Making stuff or doing activities that we're doing anyways in our lives, but without negatively impacting the earth, and even if it's possible, positively impacting it.
It means saving the earth.
It's really important to me. That's what it means.
My name is Shane Stennis. I'm the Director of Sustainability at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. I work on sustainability issues for the university campus-wide, so across the university system, with a specific focus on how do we operate the Twin Cities campus and its physical footprint.
Well, I'm Jessica Hellman, and I direct the Institute on the Environment here at the University of Minnesota. The Institute on the Environment is for all the campuses, but physically we're located on the Twin Cities campus on the St. Paul campus. So the Institute on the Environment was created more than a decade ago now, and it was built as a place where different disciplines would come together, because the environment is a big idea and a grand challenge. There are more than 200 people who are formally affiliated with the Institute on the Environment. Some of those are faculty, some of those are staff researchers, students, even some folks from outside the university have formal affiliations with the Institute.
The university's Twin Cities campus is one of the largest campuses in the country. It has 250 buildings, 1,000 acres of land, and about 24 million square feet of space. We're the third largest traffic generator in the state of Minnesota after the downtowns of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so we just have a big physical footprint.
Of course, land also is related to every other sustainability issue. And this is why sustainability is both such a vexing problem and also such an interesting problem. Because land is also about energy. Land is about biodiversity. Land is about our economy and natural capital. Land is about people's lives and livelihoods. And so when we think about sustainability in a systems way, we have to have all those parts in play at the same time and see their connectedness. A project that has been here for some time and is based here is something called the Natural Capital Project, which is very much focused on how do we evaluate the different components of our landscape and not ignore some of the values that we get from land, from forests and from biodiversity, the kinds of things that we tend to pretend like they don't have economic value, but they actually have profound influence on our economy and things that we care about.
I guess more renewable energies on campus.
Probably right off the bat, that more solar power. Yeah. After hearing how easy it is to get it installed in the federal rebates.
Solar panels everywhere.
That's a good solar panel. Yeah. Solar panels.
The University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus, over the course of the last couple of years, has really been looking at how do we provide more of our energy from renewable sources. And as part of that work, we decided to implement about a 2 megawatt on-site solar electricity generating project on the campus. It's split across 9 different sites on campus, 4 on the West Bank campus, 4 over in St. Paul, and 1 on the East Bank. And combined, those 9 sites total 2 megawatts of solar generation for electricity consumption in campus buildings. The structure of the project is really, we actually have a contractor and a vendor who's building and operating and maintaining the solar array, and then we're taking the power off of that system and using it in our campus buildings. The university was getting to a point where we didn't have enough capacity in our existing generation for heating for campus to meet all of our needs on the coldest days in the winter. And so we looked at a lot of different options for how do we meet that need and decided to implement a combined heat and power facility.
In 2016, our university finally finished building our very own CHP when we're producing our electricity. It takes the wasted heat and pipes it to our buildings. The university is like a smart city in energy requirements. We're driven to discover, learn from each other while being mindful of environment, and that's precisely why you see we use combined heat and power in making electricity.
And and using that waste heat for generating steam, what we can do is maximize the sort of useful life of that natural gas that we're using, reduce the university's costs by almost $2 million a year, and then also reduce our carbon footprint by 10 to 12% every year. Education is not just about the transmittal of knowledge, but it's about building a new understanding and also some capacity within individuals to make those transitions. And Living Lab program is really focused on trying to provide and make available campus spaces for applied research projects, demonstration projects, and sort of experiential learning around
project is evolution in urban environments, and I'm using common ragweed to investigate whether it's adapted to living in urban and rural places.
So behind me is the West Bank Community Garden, and the overall goal of this is just to bring more awareness about sustainability in food.
So the Flowers for Pollinators study, which is a living laboratory here in the U, is basically observing which annual flowers are attractive to pollinating insects.
Time. There isn't much of it. When you wake up in the morning and you look at the news, there's a lot of discouraging news about the state of our planet. On the other hand, there's also a fair amount of encouraging trends that are happening. And I think sustainability is about accelerating and thinking about the short period of time in which we need to make positive progress on sustainability. So we have to ask ourselves here at the university, what can we do to move rapidly in the face of real time constraints? Sustainability is asking us to move fast.
Thank you to all our collaborators for putting those videos together. I hope you learned how we at the University of Minnesota are teaching sustainability through the care and relationship with our campuses and the land around us. That final video, what Jessica said really stuck with me, that the time is now to take action and to get sustainability instilled in our everyday education. And I was speaking to a roommate last night who happens to be an educational psychologist, and he said there's this tool is the saying is doing effect, and in my translation of it is a written public commitment to something actually helps produce that outcome more likely to happen. So in other words, if you write something publicly and say, I'm going to do this, you're more likely you're going to do it. So to practice that today, we actually have another interactive poll, which I will pull up here with our tech wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want you to think right now, wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want you to think right now, wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want you to think right now, wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want you to think right now, wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want you to think right now, wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want you to think right now, wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want you to think right now, wizard over here, Dustin, to get the poll. Escape. Yep. So I want us out is the Twin Cities Office of Sustainability, the educators and partners and students at Crookston, Morris, Duluth, and Rochester, all of the INE educators who worked super hard to put together ideas and think of the idea for this summit, the collaborators at the Center of Educational Innovation and at the University of Minnesota Libraries, Enzia Magazine for partnering with us with the Flipgrid, and all the staff at INE. And to everyone here at the campuses and online who has decided to show up on this Friday. It might be warm in Miami, but it's getting warmer here too. So thanks for taking your time to spend this afternoon with us. At this point, in the in-person events, there'll be some closing reflective discussions. And online, it's going to be going to the Flipgrid, which, since we've been talking about it so much, let me show you what it looks reflective like. Discussions. So to get there, again, and online, it's going to be going to the Flipgrid, which, since we've been talking about it so much, let me show you what reflective discussions. So to get there, again, online, it's going to be going to the Flipgrid, main topic, which, since we've been talking about it so much, where you all have been putting tons and tons of really great questions on here related to sustainability. You can just press play and hear about Tom's idea. The volume will work in your home, and it actually auto goes to the next ones. So taking the time to engage with questions like, how can we teach sustainability to inspire meaningful change in our communities? Or how can we leverage sustainability education to create more equitable outcomes? And so we hope this is a spot where we really inspire people to connect in this innovative online Flipgrid. And again, Enzia will look through these and then investigate one or so. The other things that are on this Flipgrid is the INE impact goals. So in the fall of 2018, the Institute of the Environment announced that their new initiative called the Impact Goals. And the idea with the Impact Goals is moving from sustainability topics to actionable and achievable actions. And so to do that, there's the goals that we're focusing on at this point of the INE Impact Goals are 1, to build a carbon neutral Minnesota, 2, to ensure safe drinking water for all Minnesotans, and 3, reveal realistic alternative land uses for sustainable Minnesota. And so we want to share this with everyone who's been engaging with this Flipgrid, and we have brief descriptions from these are the leads of each impact goal, describing what their role is in it and what the goal is a bit, and then if you want to collaborate, share ideas, if you're working on these even outside of Minnesota, we're hoping to really stimulate conversation on how we can achieve these achievable yet ambitious goals. And then the final space is this INE educators, as we're talking about all the wonderful questions you've been stimulating during the presentations we collected, and you'll be able to revisit here and they'll answer the questions that you asked. The only thing I'd like to share is that the INE has opened another hub. It's called the Institute on the Environment at UMD at the Duluth campus. And it's been an exciting new initiative that the Institute has taken on in helping connect our campuses even more, like this summit does, but in an ongoing fashion. So we're really excited to have INE at UMD. So at this point, we will be ending the live stream. Again, you can stay on and go on our Flipgrid. We will have all these videos that you saw today. Fortunately, we have access to them, and we will be sharing them in a few different ways, and we'll keep you updated. We'll also have them available with closed captioning on them, so more accessible. And so at this point, the campus coordinators on campus will go ahead and describe what closing activity that you're doing at your campus. And I'll thank everyone participating on the different campuses and online. And here in the Twin Cities, I'm going to turn over to colleague, INE educator, Linda Bucharian. The only other reminder for the Twin Cities campus is our tree, which was made by Iron Made Art, which is a sustainable recycled metal sculpture organization. And that tree is to help stimulate more questions about sustainability. So when you're leaving, put some thoughts on there if you'd like. It'll be living on. So for now, turning it over to Linda.